Good afternoon and welcome to the New York State Museum. My name is Aaron Noble. I'm the Senior Historian for Political, Military, and Governmental History and the Curator of the World Trade Center collections here in Albany. As you can see, today's field trip is going to be taking you through a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at the museum's World Trade Center gallery. And we're also going to be talking about collecting in real time and collecting history as we experience it. So shortly after the events of September 11th, 2001, the New York State Museum took a leading role in preservation and collection efforts for museums in New York City, primarily because we were a state agency. We had access to a lot of the resources that smaller private museums wouldn't have had. For instance, with the Engine 6 bumper, we were able to call upon Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, New York State Police, in order to bring and transport the truck from the staging area at Fresh Kills Landfill on Staten Island to Mid-Orange Correctional Facility, and then on to the New York State Museum and installation in our gallery. More importantly than the actual physical collections of these materials, though, was the fact that we were collecting a point in time that we knew to be historic, but museums generally, historians we're good at collecting things and looking at things that happened 50, 100, 150 years ago. We're really not used to or trained to collect things as they happen. It was very clear almost immediately that September 11th, 2001 was a global changing, nationally changing moment of significant historical impact, and that it needed to be preserved. So the historians in the museum jumped into action, working closely with the FDNY, New York City Police Department, the FBI, and others in order to preserve and make sure that the history was saved, because it was very clear early on that as the material was processed, if we didn't save it at that point, it wouldn't be saved and it wouldn't be available. When the decision was made to bring the Engine 6 pumper here to Albany, one of the things that the museum was very cognizant of doing was making sure that the FDNY, and particularly Engine Company 6, and the widows of the 4 firefighters who were tragically lost on September 11th were comfortable. This is most visibly apparent in the fire hoses at the back of the truck. They're obviously, as you can see, arrayed very neatly and organized. And this is because as the truck was cleaned at Mid-Orange Correctional and decontaminated, the firefighters from Engine Company 6 were invited to come up and actually relay the hose ceremonially as they would, so that the truck is actually ready for its next ride. This was something that they felt was important. They wanted the truck not just to be a relic of this tragic event, but to honor their fallen brothers. And that's not something that museums normally do. We don't normally take an artifact and alter its historical appearance, but collecting in real time and making sure that the stakeholders and the participants in the event were comfortable, the museum felt that it was vital not only to the exhibit but also to the relationship and the ability to tell the story, that everybody had a stake in and had buy-in to the exhibit gallery. And the same thing was true over on the Staten Island collection processing at Fresh Kills Landfill, the recently closed landfill on Staten Island, where virtually all of the material recovered at the World Trade Center site was brought for sifting and sorting in what was the largest forensic and criminal evidence collection processing process in history. When the museum started arriving there early in the winter of 2001, they were met with a lot of resistance from the FBI, the NYPD, and other investigators, because it was just there was a really big disconnect between what they were doing, looking for remains of victims who had lost their lives on September 11th, and what the museum was doing, looking for ways to document the World Trade Center and the events of that day. But through communication, through listening, through not taking an aggressive collection stance, the museum was able to develop trust and a really solid working relationship with these investigators, to the point that by the time the facility closed in July of 2002, the forensic investigators were actually setting aside materials, many of which you see on display here, for the New York State Museum visits. These objects in the collection that the museum preserved, in large part, is material that was collected by these police officers, these FBI investigators, who really became de facto curators on the ground during the response and the cleanup effort and the recovery effort. And without that kind of participation, the museum collection couldn't be what it is today, and we couldn't have documented this historic event as it occurred and as it was unfolding. Over here on the tables behind me, we have some more examples of things that were preserved by individuals, by children who wanted to record their feelings and their impressions. We have some images of a journal that was done by a young girl in Brooklyn named Haley Chappell, who wanted to record her and her neighborhood's impressions of and feelings and responses to September 11th, 2001. She preserved that and eventually donated it here to the New York State Museum in Albany. In the center of the table, we have another journal that was left at St. Paul's Chapel in Lower Manhattan, which became a respite center for many of the firefighters and recovery workers and construction workers at the World Trade Center site in the months following. The journal is filled with messages of support, messages of condolence. It was left on the fence outside of the chapel, which became a memorial, makeshift memorial to the events of September 11th. And the third item on the table is a letter that was mailed from a hotel in Canada, which had housed Americans whose flights were forced to land in the immediate aftermath on September 11th, writing to those visitors who had stayed at the hotel, and just kind of expressing solidarity and support from their Canadian hosts. All of these things came to the museum after the events of September 11th, and they weren't brought here through our traditional collecting methods. It wasn't through the FDNY or the police or the FBI. These were things that individuals created, individuals felt were significant, and individuals donated after the fact to the museum. And that also brings us to the scroll here. This is a piece of butcher paper, a roll of butcher paper that was laid out in the week following September 11th, 2001 at Union Square in Manhattan by an NYU student at the time named Jordan Schuster. He and his friends realized that they wanted to do something. They wanted to feel like they were contributing, wanted to feel like they were doing something. So they got these rolls of butcher paper, they laid them out, they taped them on the pavement at Union Square, which was closed to traffic. People could go by, write their feelings, write their thoughts. In many of these scrolls, you'll find they have conversations amongst people that were not present at the same time, but were reacting and responding to other people's messages and other people's thoughts and opinions. After the Union Square was reopened to traffic and vehicular traffic, and the scrolls were picked up, Schuster stored them in a storage facility for a few years, but realized he wanted to find a more permanent way to save them and preserve them. And so he contacted curators here at the New York State Museum, and they were brought here in 2007. That kind of brings us to the where we are today. The COVID-19 pandemic has really transformed our normal. It's really disrupted everyone's lives. It's created a new paradigm for many of us. And like the events of September 11th, we very clearly know that we're living through a historic moment. Unlike September 11th, where you had a lot of the material being generated at points of contact where people could come together and find support and solidarity, we don't have that here with the COVID-19 pandemic. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't find ways to preserve and save this material for future generations. So I would encourage you, many people don't realize that New York State is the only state to actually mandate that every town and municipality has a governmental appointed historian. We're going to post something on the comments here shortly about where you can get in touch with and find who your local historian is. I encourage you to get in touch with them, get in touch with your local museum, your local historical society, find out what those curators, what those historians are doing to document the pandemic, and find out how you can help. Things that you can do, we'll also have a list of simple steps that you can do while safely maintaining social distance. Keep a journal, either writing it down, blogs, video blogs, of your daily experiences. What is life like during this pandemic for you in a quarantine situation? Express yourself artistically, as Haley Chappell did. Find a way to document how your life has changed, how your daily existence has changed. Track things that your local government is doing. How is your community coming together while not being able to physically come together? For instance, the capital region here in Albany, you have the 518 Rainbow Hunt, which has been incredibly popular, and it's been a way for the community to express solidarity while maintaining social distance. Go out in your neighborhood, take pictures of the rainbows that you find, save those. Organizations around the state I know are already working on this or working towards it. You'll see the website link in the attachment that we're going to post to contact your local historians through the Association of Public Historians of New York State, or AFNIS. Schenectady County Historical Society Association here in the capital region is actively looking for people to assist with the preservation efforts, as is Oneida County History Center in Utica. The Orange County historian in the Hudson Valley has an online Google form that you can actually log into for Orange County residents and input information about your experiences. Museum of the City of New York in New York City has started an Instagram hashtag, NYC COVID NYC stories, that you can also find and post photos of life in New York City. But I would really encourage you to see yourselves as curators on the ground and curators in the field. This is not an event that we're going to be able to rely on one source to document it. And it's something that's going to impact every community differently. And in order to express and document and preserve the diversity of the experiences and the diversity of the state of New York, it's going to be really vital that we have you as the public's assistance in this. And you can reach out to the New York State Museum curators and historians for ways that you can be involved. All of our contact information is on the State Museum website. So with that, I will, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. But other than that, I hope you have a great day, and thank you for tuning in.